Imagine spending 24 hours a day for weeks on end surrounded by corpses, living in mud so deep men literally drowned in it, while rats feasted on the dead bodies all around you. This wasn't some horror movie. This was the daily reality for millions of soldiers in World War I. The trenches of the Western Front weren't just a military tactic, they were a living nightmare that pushed human endurance beyond anything we could comprehend today. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, let's head back to 1916. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously. Adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. So congratulations, you just woke up in a frontline trench on the Western Front of World War I. Your eyes flutter open to darkness, the air is damp and cold, seeping through the rough wool of your uniform. You're not in a bed, you're wedged into a small dugout carved into the clay wall of the trench, just deep enough for your body. The hard-packed earth beneath you has numbed your hip, and there's a persistent dripping of water from somewhere above, landing with maddening regularity just inches from your face, not like your comfy bed right now. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Dear God, the smell. It's a horrific cocktail of unwashed bodies, human waste, rotting corpses, cordite from spent ammunition, and the sickly sweet odour of gangrene from wounded men. You'll never forget this smell as long as you live. You'll never fully wash it from your nostrils or your memory. You reach up and feel something crawling in your hair. Lice. They're everywhere. In your hair, your clothes, your bedding, they bite constantly, causing a maddening itch that never stops. The men call it the trench curse. You'll spend hours chatting, crushing lice between your thumbnails, but they always come back. Always. The dugout is small, carved into the side of the trench where you sleep when you're not on watch. It's reinforced with whatever could be scrounged, wooden planks, corrugated metal, sometimes even doors or furniture from destroyed villages nearby. In winter, it's freezing. In summer, it's stifling. It's never comfortable, but it's the closest thing to safety you'll find out here. Slowly, painfully, you pull yourself up and out of your dugout. Your uniform is damp, always damp. Your boots squish in the mud as you stand fully in the trench. It's dawn, which means it's time for stand to, the most dangerous time of day when everyone must be alert at the firing step, rifles ready in case of a dawn attack. The trench itself is about 7 feet deep and 6 feet wide, zigzagging for miles to prevent enemy fire from shooting straight down the line. The walls are supported by sandbags and wooden planks, though in many places they've collapsed from rain or shell fire. Duckboards, wooden slats, cover the bottom in an attempt to keep your feet above the mud and water, but it's a losing battle. When it rains heavily, the water can rise to your knees or higher. You're not alone. All along the trench, other men are emerging from dugouts and funk holes, bleary-eyed and exhausted. Some have been on night watch and look even worse than you feel. Their faces are gaunt, bearded, with 1,000-yard stares that seem to look right through you. These are the faces of men who have seen too much. Bloody hell, another day in paradise, mutters the man next to you, a grizzled corporal with a Manchester accent. His name is Thomas, you remember. He's been here for 14 months already. Better get your gear sorted before the sergeant comes round. You check your equipment. 303 is wrapped in cloth to keep the mud out of the mechanism. It needs to be cleaned daily, sometimes hourly, to prevent jamming. Your gas mask hangs around your neck in its canvas bag. It must always be within reach. Your helmet sits heavy on your head and your pockets are stuffed with extra ammunition. You carry a bayonet, a small shovel called an entrenching tool, a canteen of water, and emergency iron rations for when regular supplies can't get through. Suddenly, a whistle blows. Everyone freezes. 3 short blasts. Gas alert. Your heart pounds as you fumble for your gas mask, hands shaking. You've been trained for this, but the terror never diminishes. The mask is made of canvas with glass eyepieces and a filter at the front. It's claustrophobic and makes it hard to breathe even when there's no gas, but without it, you're dead. False alarm, calls a voice from further down the line. Just testing. Keep your wits about you, lads. The masks come off, but the fear lingers. Gas is the most dreaded weapon out here. Chlorine that burns your lungs and drowns you from the inside. Phosgene that kills hours after exposure, giving you time to realize you're dying. Mustard gas that burns your skin and blinds your eyes. You've seen men die from gas, their faces turned blue, frothing at the mouth, begging for air that won't come. Breakfast, comes the call, and men shuffle toward the cooking area, just a small alcove where a soldier stirs a pot over a carefully shielded flame. No smoke can rise visibly, or it will draw enemy fire. You're handed a tin mug of tea, strong, sweet, and hot, a true luxury out here, then a scoop of watery porridge and a hunk of bread that's slightly stale but edible. The bread often arrives from the rear already mouldy, especially in summer, but hungry men scrape off what they can and eat the rest. As you eat, rats scurry boldly across the trench floor. They're enormous, fattened on a diet of corpses and completely fearless. Some are as big as cats. Men tell stories of waking to find rats gnawing on their boots, or worse, their faces. At night, you can hear them squealing and fighting just inches from where you sleep. The cats that were brought in to control them have long since been killed by gas or shell fire. After breakfast, the day's duties are assigned. Some men are sent to repair damaged sections of the trench, filling sandbags and shoring up collapsing walls. Others are assigned to sentry duty, peering through periscopes at no man's land, that hellish stretch of cratered earth between your trench and the enemy's. Still others are sent to the latrine, just a bucket in a separate small dugout that must be emptied regularly, a despised task. You're assigned to a working party with 5 other men. Your job is to string new barbed wire in front of the trench tonight. It's dangerous work done under cover of darkness when you'll be exposed and vulnerable to enemy fire, but for now you prepare the materials. Spools of wire, wooden stakes, mallets wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound. Midday brings another meal. Bully beef, tinned corned beef, and more bread, perhaps some jam if you're lucky. The food is monotonous but vital. Men burn calories fast out here from stress, physical labour, and the constant cold. In the afternoon, an officer comes through for inspection. Lieutenant Parker is young, probably no more than 22, but his eyes look ancient. He checks rifles, makes sure everyone has their gas masks, and reminds you all to keep your feet as dry as possible. Trench foot is taking more men out of action than German bullets this month, he says grimly. Change your socks when you can and rub whale oil on your feet when supplies come through. Trench foot is a fungal infection caused by constant dampness. Your feet turn numb, then red and swollen, then blue. If not treated, gangrene sets in and amputation follows. You've seen men carried out on stretchers, their feet blackened and rotting. You make a mental note to check your own feet tonight. The afternoon drags on. Clouds gather overhead, threatening rain. The enemy of trench life. When it rains, trenches flood, walls collapse, and life becomes even more miserable than usual. Men have drowned in mud here, sinking in shell holes or collapsed trenches, too weighted down by equipment to pull themselves out. Around 4 o'clock, the enemy artillery begins. First, just a few ranging shots, then a full barrage. The ground shakes beneath your feet as shells explode all around. You press yourself against the trench wall, trying to make yourself as small as possible. The noise is deafening, not just loud, but physically painful, vibrating through your skull and chest. They're ranging for a night attack, says Thomas, crouching beside you. Going to be a long one, lad. This is what men fear most, the helplessness of an artillery bombardment. There's nothing to do but wait, hope, and perhaps pray. A direct hit means instant death. A near miss can bury you alive or tear off limbs. The shells contain high explosives, shrapnel, or gas. Each has its own distinctive sound as it flies overhead, a sound you quickly learn to recognize and fear. Shell fragments whine through the air like angry hornets. Earth and debris rain down. The smell of explosive fills your nostrils, and all the while you're pressed against cold earth, trying not to scream or run or lose control of your bowels. Some men do all three. After what feels like eternity but is probably only 20 minutes, the barrage lifts. The sudden silence is almost as shocking as the noise was. Men emerge from whatever cover they found, shaking, checking themselves for wounds, helping those who weren't as lucky. 2 men from the next section of trench are dead, torn apart by a direct hit. 3 more are wounded, 1 missing an arm, another with shrapnel in his leg, the 3rd concussed and unable to hear. Stretcher bearers arrive quickly, carrying the wounded to the aid post behind the lines. The dead will be buried tonight, if possible, or simply laid in a shell hole and covered with earth if the fighting is too intense. You help clean up the mess left by the shells, filling in craters, rebuilding collapsed sections of trench, retrieving equipment scattered by blasts. The work is grim but necessary. The trench is your home and your protection. It must be maintained. As evening approaches, you're given your night duties. You'll be on sentry duty from 8 p.m. to midnight, then part of the wiring party from 2 a.m. until dawn. In between, if you're lucky, you might get 2 hours of sleep. The darkness brings a different kind of war. Activity increases on both sides under cover of night. Ration parties arrive with food and supplies, wounded are evacuated, repairs are made, and raiding parties go out into no man's land to gather intelligence, take prisoners, or simply kill the enemy. Your sentry duty passes uneventfully, though tense. You peer into the darkness, straining to see movement, jumping at every sound. False alarms can get you ridiculed. Missing an actual approach can get everyone killed. The responsibility weighs heavy. At midnight, you're relieved and stumble back to your dugout for a precious 2 hours of rest. You don't bother removing your boots or equipment. You might need to move fast if an attack comes. You simply curl up in your damp hole, pull a blanket over yourself, and close your eyes. Sleep comes quickly, despite the discomfort. You're exhausted beyond measure, but it seems like only minutes later that you're being shaken awake for the wiring party. It's 2 a.m., pitch black and drizzling. Or stay low, move slow, no talking, instructs the sergeant leading your group. Anyone makes a noise out there, we're all dead. Carrying spools of barbed wire and stakes, you follow the others over the top of the trench and out into no man's land. This is the most dangerous place on Earth, a wasteland of shell holes, corpses and broken equipment, all under the watchful eyes of enemy machine gunners. You crawl on your belly through mud that reeks of death and chemicals. Every few yards you pass a corpse or part of one. Men who died in previous attacks and couldn't be recovered. Some have been out here for months in various stages of decomposition. You try not to look at their faces. The work is painful and terrifying. Barbed wire tears at your hands, even through gloves. Every sound, the clinking of wire, the soft thud of a mallet on a stake, seems impossibly loud in the darkness. Enemy flares occasionally light up the sky, and when they do, everyone freezes, becoming part of the landscape until darkness returns. It takes 3 hours to string a new line of wire, 3 hours of crawling through hell, expecting death at any moment. When you finally make it back to your trench, your uniform is caked with mud and blood from both the barbed wire and the decomposing bodies you had to crawl past. Dawn approaches, which means another stand to. No sleep now until perhaps the afternoon, if things are quiet. As the sky lightens, you take your position at the firing step, rifle ready, watching for any sign of attack from the German trenches just 200 yards away. This is your life now. Day after day of mud, fear, exhaustion, and death. Some men break down completely, weeping, unable to function, sometimes even shooting themselves to escape. They call it shell shock, a term that barely begins to describe the psychological devastation of trench warfare. Others develop a fatalistic humour, joking about death and making art from shell casings. Many become superstitious, carrying talismans or performing rituals they believe will keep them safe. Most simply endure, one day at a time, not thinking too far ahead because the future is too uncertain. The morning sun breaks through the clouds, illuminating no man's land in harsh detail. The sight never becomes easier to bear, a moonscape of craters filled with stagnant water, tangles of rusty barbed wire, and the remains of attacks that failed. Here and there, decomposing bodies lie in impossible positions, some still reaching toward your lines in their final moments of hope. And across this hellscape, barely visible in the distance, are the German trenches, the enemy, men just like you, living in the same conditions, fighting for reasons that seem increasingly meaningless in the face of such suffering. A runner arrives with a message for your lieutenant. The officers confer briefly, their faces grave. Then the lieutenant approaches your section. "We're going over the top tomorrow at dawn," he says simply. "Get whatever rest you can today. Write your letters home. Be ready." A cold weight settles in your stomach. Going over the top means climbing out of the relative safety of your trench and charging across no man's land towards the enemy lines. It's effectively a death sentence. The machine guns will cut down most of you before you're halfway across. But that's tomorrow's nightmare. For now, there's equipment to clean, letters to write, and perhaps a few hours of fitful sleep to be had. This is your world now, a narrow ditch in the earth where life and death exist side by side, where each sunrise might be your last, where the true enemy isn't the Germans, but the war itself. Thomas sees your expression and offers you a cigarette, a precious commodity out here. "First time going over?" he asks, though he knows the answer. You nod, unable to speak around the knot of fear in your throat. "Look at the man to your right and your left when you go," he says, lighting his own cigarette with hands that don't quite shake. "Don't think about anything else. Just keep moving and stay with them. That's all you can do." His words offer little comfort, but his presence does. Out here, brotherhood is forged in blood and terror. The men around you are the only ones who truly understand what this is like. They're the only family that matters now. As morning fully arrives and activity in the trench increases, you clean your rifle methodically, checking each part. It may be your life tomorrow. Around you, other men write letters, pray, or stare blankly into the distance. Some joke and laugh too loudly, a brittle shield against the fear. The day stretches ahead, your possibly last day on Earth, filled with preparations for an attack that few of you will survive. But that's the nature of this war, this meat grinder that consumes young men by the thousands for a few yards of mud. This is life in the trenches of World War I, a life of extremes, extreme discomfort, extreme danger, extreme camaraderie, a life where a dry pair of socks can seem like a miracle and a letter from home like a lifeline to another world that grows more distant with each passing day. Dawn breaks on another day in the trenches. The morning routine is the same every day, no matter where you are along the vast Western Front. From the English Channel to the Swiss border, hundreds of thousands of men rise in the pre-dawn darkness and prepare for the most dangerous time of day. All stand to. The whispered command passes down the line. Every available man must be at his post, rifle loaded, bayonet fixed, ready to repel an attack. Dawn and dusk are when attacks most commonly come, so these are times of heightened vigilance. You take your position at the fire step, a narrow ledge cut into the forward wall of the trench that allows you to peer over the parapet at no man's land. Your body aches from yesterday's labour and the cold, damp night, but you force yourself to focus. Lives depend on it. As the sky lightens, revealing another grey day, the tension gradually eases. No attack this morning. A collective exhale passes through the trench as the stand-to ends. Now the day's real routines begin. First comes the morning hate, a ritual exchange of artillery and mortar fire that both sides engage in, almost like saying good morning with explosives. It usually lasts about 30 minutes. Veterans can tell which German batteries are firing just by the sound of the incoming shells. "That's Bavarians over there," says a weathered sergeant, cocking his head at the distinctive whistle of an incoming round, always prompt with their morning deliveries. After the morning hate subsides, it's time for breakfast, the first of 2 daily meals served in the trenches. The company cooks, stationed in a somewhat sheltered dugout behind the lines, have been working since before dawn. You join the queue of men waiting with their mess tins. The cooks are a surly bunch, having worked through the night, but they're respected figures. A man who can make edible food from army rations is worth his weight in gold. "What's on the menu today, cookie?" someone calls out. "Breakfast à la trench," the cook replies dryly, "same as yesterday and the day before." Into your mess tin goes a ladle of lukewarm tea, so strong it's almost black, sweetened with condensed milk and heaps of sugar for quick energy. Next comes a scoop of bacon, if you're lucky, or more likely a portion of bully beef, canned corned beef that forms the staple of the British soldier's diet. A hard biscuit accompanies it, sometimes so tough that men joke about writing letters home on them. "Beats what the Germans are eating," says the man next to you, chewing determinedly on his biscuit. "Heard they're on turnip bread now." Food shortages on the German side have indeed become severe, with flour being cut with ground-dried turnips to make their bread. Finding a relatively dry spot to sit, you eat quickly. The food is monotonous but filling, providing the calories needed for the physical labour of trench life. In your pocket, you carry an iron ration, emergency food to be used only if regular supplies can't get through. It consists of a small tin of bully beef, some biscuits, and a bit of tea and sugar. Men who eat their iron rations without permission face severe punishment. After breakfast comes the rum ration, perhaps the most beloved moment of the day. The quartermaster sergeant appears with a large earthenware jar marked SRD, Service Rum Diluted, though soldiers joke it stands for Soon Runs Dry. Each man receives a small tot of dark rum in his tea mug, just enough to warm the belly and brace the nerves. Officers debate the morality of issuing alcohol, but in the trenches, no one questions its value. It helps men cope with cold, fear, and the constant strain of frontline service. Some religious men pass their ration to grateful comrades. With breakfast finished, the day's work assignments are handed out. Trench maintenance is a never-ending task. The walls constantly collapse from rain and shell fire. The floor becomes a quagmire without proper drainage. Sandbags rot and need replacement. Duckboards sink into the mud. Today, you're assigned to a drainage detail. Water is the trench's greatest enemy after the Germans. Without proper drainage, trenches flood, leading to immersion-foot collapsed walls and miserable living conditions. Your squad digs drainage channels, trying to direct the water away from living and fighting areas. It's back-breaking work, made harder by the need to stay below the parapet to avoid snipers. The mud seems alive, almost malevolent in its capacity to swallow tools, fill in freshly dug channels, and seep into everything. Midway through the morning, word passes down the line that mail has arrived. Mail call is a momentous occasion, a tenuous link to the world beyond the trenches. You pause your work, hoping to hear your name called. The company clerk moves along the trench, reading names from a stack of letters and small packages. Williams, Parker, Taylor, Davies. Hearing your name, you reach eagerly for the envelope. It's from home, your mother's handwriting. You tuck it carefully inside your tunic. You'll read it tonight, in private. Letters are treasures to be savoured, not rushed through. Some men receive packages as well, comforts from home containing knitted socks, chocolate, tobacco, or homemade cakes. These are often shared, creating brief moments of normality in the abnormal world of the trenches. Back to work. The morning passes slowly. Around 11, you notice men looking at their watches more frequently. Word spreads that a ration party is due from the rear with supplies, fresh bread, tea, sugar, perhaps even newspapers. Ration parties are dangerous undertakings. Men must carry heavy loads through communication trenches that are often flooded, collapsed, or under enemy observation. If the communication trenches are too damaged, they might have to cross open ground, risking sniper fire. Today's ration party arrives intact, led by a red-faced corporal cursing the German artillery that targeted them along the way. The supplies are distributed quickly. The bread is reasonably fresh, having been baked last night in field ovens behind the lines. There are tins of jam, plum and apple today, and more tea and sugar. Also arriving is the water cart. Water in the trenches is as precious as ammunition. Each man carries a canteen, but this must last between refills. The water is heavily chlorinated to prevent disease, giving it a chemical taste that never quite becomes palatable. Men collect rainwater when they can, but with corpses decomposing in no man's land, even rainwater can carry disease. You fill your canteen and drink sparingly. Dehydration is common, especially in summer when men sweat heavily under woolen uniforms, but a full bladder can be problematic when latrines are distant or shelling makes movement dangerous. Speaking of latrines, they're one of the most unpleasant aspects of trench life. In well-established trenches, latrines are deep pits with wooden seats, located in small tributary trenches for privacy and to keep the smell somewhat contained. They're regularly treated with chloride of lime to reduce odour and prevent flies from breeding. In newly dug or temporary trenches, facilities might be as basic as a bucket that must be emptied regularly over the parapet, a dangerous job done at night. Some trenches use chemical toilets, but these are rare luxuries. Personal hygiene is a constant struggle. You haven't had a proper bath in weeks. At best, you might manage a canteen bath, washing from your helmet using a minimal amount of water. Shaving is required to ensure gas masks seal properly, done with cold water and often shared razors. Lice are the constant companions of every soldier, regardless of rank or cleanliness. They live in the seams of clothing, causing intense itching and spreading trench fever, a debilitating illness with high fever and severe headaches. The most effective delousing method is chatting. running a candle flame along the seams of clothing to burst the eggs, then crushing the adult lice between thumbnails. It's a social activity with men helping each other reach difficult spots, sharing news and gossip as they work. "Got a beauty here," says the Lancashire lad next to you, displaying a particularly fat specimen before crushing it with evident satisfaction. "Reckon that one's been dining on officers." Midday brings the second and final meal of the day. More bully beef, perhaps transformed into a stew if the cooks are creative, with hardtack biscuits and jam. On good days, there might be cheese or tinned vegetables. On very good days, fresh meat might arrive for stew, though this is increasingly rare as the war progresses. After the midday meal comes another stand-to, though briefer than the morning one. Then work resumes, interrupted periodically by shell fire or sniper activity. Communication in the trenches is a complex system. Field telephones connect command posts, but wires are frequently cut by shells. When phones fail, runners take their place. Men who carry messages by hand through the trench system, one of the most dangerous jobs on the front. You watch one such runner splash past, a sealed message tube in his hand, moving with the hunched posture all veterans develop to avoid the higher parts of the trench where snipers might spot them. Other forms of communication include signal flares, flags, heliographs and carrier pigeons. The pigeons, housed in mobile lofts behind the lines, have a remarkable success rate, delivering messages even through gas and shell fire. Weather is a constant factor in trench life. Rain transforms trenches into muddy canals. Summer heat brings flies and the stench of decomposition. Winter brings frostbite and trench foot. Today, a light drizzle begins around mid-afternoon, just enough to make everything damp without providing the dramatic shelter of a downpour. The clay soil becomes slippery and work slows as men struggle to maintain footing. "Could be worse," says Thomas philosophically. "Remember that storm last month? Lightning hitting the wire? Germans thought we were attacking and opened up with everything they had." Trench foot is the most common ailment in wet conditions. Prevention becomes almost ritualistic. When possible, men remove their boots and socks, dry their feet, and massage them with whale oil or grease. Dry socks are treasured possessions. Officers inspect feet regularly, knowing that a man with trench foot is a man lost from the fighting strength. "Show me your plates," a lieutenant orders, using the slang term for feet. Men dutifully remove boots and socks for inspection. Those showing early signs of trench foot, whitened, wrinkled skin, are ordered to the medical officer. Medical care in the trenches follows a tiered system. Minor injuries and illnesses are treated at an aid post just behind the front line. More serious cases go to a dressing station further back, then to a casualty clearing station, and finally to a base hospital if necessary. The regimental medical officer makes his rounds once a day, treating everything from trench foot to shell shock. He distributes tablets for dysentery, iodine for cuts, and rum for almost everything else. Complex cases go back down the line, with stretcher bearers navigating the treacherous communication trenches carrying their broken human cargo. By late afternoon, the drizzle has stopped, but the trenches remain slick with mud. Work parties are finishing up, securing tools and materials before evening stand to. The routine is mind-numbing in its repetition, yet the constant threat of death prevents true boredom. Soldiers learn to catch sleep whenever possible. Between tasks, men doze against trench walls or in shallow dugouts. Sleep is always light, disturbed by shell fire, orders, or the need to move. Most men develop the ability to wake instantly at the slightest unusual sound. As evening approaches, activity increases. Ration parties arrive with the day's second food delivery. Wounded are evacuated under cover of growing darkness. Relief troops might arrive, allowing some men to rotate to support or reserve trenches for a brief respite from the front line. The trench system typically consists of 3 parallel lines. The front line faces the enemy directly. Behind it lies the support trench, housing company headquarters, reserve troops, and some supplies. Further back is the reserve trench with battalion headquarters and more substantial dugouts. Men rotate between these positions, typically spending 4 to 6 days in each before moving to billets behind the lines for rest. Relief is a carefully orchestrated process. Incoming troops arrive with guides who know the trench layout. They're briefed on recent enemy activity, dangerous areas, and ongoing work. Equipment checks ensure gas masks and ammunition are sufficient. Then the outgoing troops depart quietly, leaving the newcomers to settle in. But there's no relief scheduled for your unit tonight. You'll remain in the front line for at least 3 more days before rotating back. Evening stand to begins as the light fades. Every man returns to the fire step, watching no man's land intently for signs of enemy movement. This is when trench raids often occur. Small parties of men crossing to enemy trenches to gather intelligence, take prisoners, or simply kill the enemy and destroy their positions. The gathering darkness brings a strange transformation. Daytime's enforced stillness gives way to cautious activity. Working parties emerge to repair damage under cover of night. Ration carriers move more freely. Sentries remain vigilant, but others can move, stretch, and work with less fear of snipers. Weather determines much of the night's activity. Clear nights with moonlight or flares make movement dangerous. Stormy nights provide cover but make work difficult. Tonight is cloudy but dry. Good conditions for necessary tasks. Your evening duty is sentry work, 2 hours of intense vigilance, peering into the darkness, listening for the subtle sounds that might indicate an enemy patrol or raid. It's mentally exhausting, requiring total concentration. Missing an approaching enemy could mean death for everyone in your section. Sentries work in pairs when possible, helping each other stay alert. The standard routine is 1 hour on, 1 hour off, an hour watching, then an hour standing by, ready to respond if needed. This prevents the mental fatigue that leads to mistakes. You take your position, rifle ready, eyes straining into the darkness. The landscape of no man's land appears different at night, more threatening, shadows shifting in ways that play tricks on tired eyes. Flares fired periodically illuminate the scene with harsh, unnatural light, creating moments of blinding exposure followed by deeper darkness. Keep your eyes moving, advises the veteran sharing your sentry post. Don't stare at one spot or you'll start seeing things that ain't there. The hours pass slowly. Every rustle in the wire, every shadow movement demands attention. Is it an enemy patrol or just a rat moving among the corpses? The wrong decision could be fatal. Between watches, men write letters home by candlelight, carefully shielded to prevent any light from escaping. They clean weapons, mend clothing, or simply talk in low voices. Conversation typically revolves around food, women, or home, rarely about the war itself. Those who've been at the front longest speak the least about combat. My wife says they've got meat rationing now back home, says a corporal, reading from a letter. 1.5 pounds a week per person. She's learning to make rabbit stew. Rabbit stew, another man sighs dreamily. My mum makes it with carrots and these little dumplings. Food is a favourite topic, perhaps because trench rations are so monotonous. Men describe meals from home in loving detail, creating shared fantasies of proper food that help distract from the present reality. Officers move along the trench, checking sentries, inspecting equipment, ensuring gas masks are ready. They carry the additional burden of responsibility for their men, making decisions that will determine who lives and dies. Your lieutenant stops briefly at your position. "Anything?" he asks quietly. "Nothing moving, sir," you report. "All quiet." He nods and moves on, his young face looking drawn and old in the dim light of a shielded torch. Officers age quickly at the front. Around midnight, your sentry duty ends. You're relieved by the next watch and make your way to your dugout for a few hours of precious sleep. The dugout is crowded with men from your section, some already asleep, others writing letters or playing cards with a carefully shielded candle providing minimal light. You find your space, barely enough room to stretch out and settle in, using your pack as a pillow. Despite the discomfort, exhaustion pulls you towards sleep. The last sounds you register are the distant crump of artillery, the scurrying of rats, and the soft breathing of men around you. Sleep in the trenches is rarely deep or restful. Dreams are vivid and often nightmarish. Men frequently cry out, reliving attacks or bombardments. Others sleepwalk and must be carefully guided back to safety before they climb over the parapet in their sleep. You wake to the sound of shells, a brief nighttime harassment barrage that the Germans send over every few hours. The explosions are distant, hitting the support trenches rather than your position, but sleep is impossible during shell fire. Around you, other men are awake too, listening to the familiar whistle-crump sequence, gauging distance and direction with the expertise of unwilling professionals. When the shelling stops, the trench gradually quiets again. Some men return to sleep, others lie awake, thinking of home or what tomorrow might bring. The night hours stretch long for those who can't find rest. At 3 a.m, you're woken for your second sentry duty of the night. Groggily, you make your way back to the fire step, relieving a man who's barely visible in the darkness. "Anything?" you ask, the eternal question of sentries everywhere. "Thought I heard wire cutters about an hour ago," he replies. "Fired a few rounds, then nothing, probably rats." You nod and take position, rifle ready, senses gradually sharpening as sleep falls away. The pre-dawn hours are the coldest and darkest, when morale dips lowest and the enemy is most likely to probe defences. The sky begins to lighten almost imperceptibly around 5 a.m. The darkness shifts from black to deep blue, then gradually to grey. It's the most dangerous time, when dawn patrols and raids often occur, taking advantage of the half-light that makes movement difficult to detect. Word passes down the line. Stand to. Again, every man takes position, watching intently as no man's land emerges from darkness. The daily cycle of the trenches completes and begins again. As full daylight arrives with no enemy attack, the morning routine resumes. Another day of waiting, working, and watching begins. The constant cycle wears men down physically and mentally, yet they adapt with remarkable resilience. Humour remains, friendships deepen, and life continues in this narrow world of mud and danger. Breakfast arrives. Tea, biscuits and bacon today, a welcome change from bully beef. The tea is hot and sweet, a small luxury that means more than civilians could understand. You drink it slowly, savouring the warmth and momentary comfort. Mail today, announces the sergeant, and hot rations coming up tonight if the road holds. These small announcements bring disproportionate pleasure. A letter, a hot meal, a dry pair of socks. In the trenches, such things become treasures beyond price. After breakfast, new work assignments are distributed. Today, you're on a sandbag filling detail. Mindless labour, but relatively safe. You join a group in a wider section of trench where empty sandbags and a pile of earth await. The work is methodical. Hold the bag open, shovel in earth, Pack it down, tie it closed, stack it ready for use. Repeat endlessly. Thousands of sandbags are needed daily to repair damage from shells and weather. As you work, conversation flows around you. Men discuss the rumoured relief coming in 3 days, debate whether the war will end this year, share news from recent newspapers. The work passes more quickly with talk, and filled sandbags pile up steadily. Midway through your second week in the trenches, you've settled into the grinding routine of stand-to, work, meals and sentry duty. The initial shock has faded, replaced by a wary familiarity. Veterans call it getting your trench legs. That moment when ducking for cover becomes instinct, and you can distinguish between different types of incoming shells just by sound. But comfort in the trenches is always an illusion, shattered without warning when the reality of war intrudes. Today begins like any other. Until it doesn't. You're repairing a section of collapsed trench wall when you hear it, a different sound from the usual morning artillery. First, a series of deep, hollow thumps from the German lines, then the distinctive whoosh of projectiles arcing through the air. "Minenwerfer!" someone shouts. "Take cover!" The German Minenwerfer is a trench mortar, a short-range, high-angle weapon that lobs shells directly into trenches. Unlike traditional artillery that fires from miles behind the lines, these mortars are positioned just behind the front line, making their projectiles almost impossible to spot until it's too late. You dive into the nearest dugout as the first explosion hits, shockingly close. The ground bucks beneath you. Dirt and splinters rain down. Your ears ring painfully from the concussion. Before you can recover, a second shell hits, then a third. The Germans are bracketing your position, firing shells at different ranges to find their target. Once they have the range, they'll pound this section of trench methodically. "Stay down," shouts a sergeant as men instinctively try to run. They're walking it in. Trench mortars are terrifying precisely because you're trapped. In open warfare, soldiers can spread out to minimize casualties from shells. In trenches, you're confined to narrow pathways that channel the blast effects. A direct hit from a Minenwerfer can obliterate an entire section of trench and everyone in it. The bombardment continues for 20 minutes that feel like hours. Each impact shakes more dirt from the dugout ceiling. The air fills with smoke and dust, making breathing difficult. Men press themselves against walls or curl into the smallest possible targets, eyes shut, some praying, others cursing. When it finally stops, the silence seems unnatural. Then the calls begin. Casualties? Anyone hit? Stretcher bearers to point 4. Shore up that wall before it collapses. You emerge cautiously from the dugout. The trench landscape has changed. Where there was a functioning fire step, there's now a cratered gap. A communications dugout has collapsed entirely. 2 men are pulling a third from the debris, his face covered in blood but miraculously still alive. This is the brutal arithmetic of trench warfare. Hundreds of shells fired to kill or wound a handful of men, but over time, the casualties accumulate. The German artillery has different types of shells for different purposes. High explosive shells demolish structures and defences. Shrapnel shells burst in the air, spraying metal fragments downward. Gas shells release clouds of poison. The Germans aren't the only ones with artillery, of course. Behind your lines, British guns reply to the German barrage. The 18-pounders fire rapid, flat-trajectory shells good for wire-cutting and targeting infantry. The larger howitzers lob heavier shells in high arcs to reach German dugouts and rear areas. "Counter-battery fire," explains a corporal as the British guns thunder. They're trying to knock out those mortars. Artillery is the great killer of this war, responsible for more casualties than any other weapon. Men fear it more than rifle fire or even machine guns because it's so impersonal and inescapable. There's no defense except to dig deeper and hope for the best. As you help clear debris from the collapsed section, an officer appears with a working party. "We need to get this repaired before nightfall," he says, surveying the damage. Jerry will follow up with a raid if he thinks he's created a weak point. Raids are a constant feature of trench warfare. Small groups of men who cross no man's land to enter enemy trenches, kill defenders, take prisoners for interrogation, and gather intelligence about defenses. Both sides conduct them regularly, creating a constant state of tension, especially at night. The work to repair the trench is urgent and dangerous. The Germans might resume shelling at any time, targeting repair crews specifically. You fill sandbags rapidly, passing them to men rebuilding the parapet. Others salvage usable duckboards and support timbers from the wreckage. As you work, a rumour passes down the line. The neighbouring regiment suffered a gas attack before dawn. Chlorine or phosgene, no one's sure. Several men dead, dozens sent to the rear with burned lungs. Gas is perhaps the most dreaded weapon on the Western Front. Introduced by the Germans at the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, it was quickly adopted by all sides despite international agreements banning its use. Different types produce different effects, all horrific. Chlorine gas burns the lungs and drowns victims in their own fluids. Phosgene does similar damage but more slowly, sometimes letting men walk away seemingly fine, only to collapse and die hours later as their lungs fill with liquid. Mustard gas blisters skin and blinds eyes in addition to damaging the respiratory system. Gas attacks typically begin with a strange hissing sound as cylinders release their contents. The gas forms visible clouds that drift with the wind toward enemy trenches. Later in the war, gas shells that could be fired from artillery became more common, giving less warning than cylinder releases. Your gas mask hangs around your neck in its canvas bag, a constant companion. Early masks were primitive, sometimes just gauze pads soaked in urine, which contained chemicals that neutralized chlorine. By your time in the trenches, the small box respirator has become standard issue, a mask connected to a filter box containing charcoal and chemicals that neutralize various gases. Gas drills are conducted regularly. You can don your mask in less than 6 seconds, not from any natural talent, but because failing to do so means death or permanent disability. Men with damaged lungs from gas are pitied more than amputees. At least a man missing a limb can breathe without feeling like he's drowning. By midday, the trench section is roughly repaired. Not pretty, but functional. You're rotating back to your dugout for a brief rest when the call comes. Sniper, keep down at junction 4. Every trench system has its dangerous spots, places where the design provides less protection or where enemy snipers have particularly good fields of fire. These become known to veterans who warn newcomers repeatedly. Snipers are a constant threat. Skilled marksmen armed with rifles fitted with telescopic sights, often operating from carefully concealed positions. They target officers, machine gunners, and observation posts primarily, but will shoot any careless soldier who exposes himself. You press against the trench wall instinctively, making yourself smaller. Around you, other men do the same, ducking below the parapet level. Movement in the trenches becomes a strange, hunched ballet, staying low, moving quickly across open spaces, using trevises. The zigzag turns in the trench for protection. Got Phillips right through the head, someone whispers. Never knew what hit him. Snipers create a psychological impact far beyond their actual casualty numbers. The knowledge that showing yourself for even seconds might mean instant death leads to constant stress. Men develop a permanent stoop from living below the parapet, so ingrained that they maintain it even when on leave, far from the front. Counter-sniping becomes an art form. Specially trained marksmen watch for the flash of enemy rifles or subtle signs of concealed positions. They use dummy heads raised briefly above the parapet to draw fire, revealing enemy positions. It's a deadly chess game played across no man's land. In the afternoon, word comes that you're needed for a wiring party tonight. The morning's bombardment damaged sections of wire entanglements in front of your trench. These must be repaired under cover of darkness to prevent enemy infiltration. Wiring parties are among the most dangerous assignments. Men must leave the relative safety of the trench and work in no man's land, exposed to enemy fire. They work with barbed wire, difficult to handle in daylight, nearly impossible in darkness while wearing gloves. The wire snags on clothing, tears, flesh, and makes noise that can attract attention. As evening approaches, the lieutenant briefs your group of 6 men. "We've got damage to about 30 yards of wire," he explains, pointing to a rough map. 2 gaps big enough for raiding parties to get through. We need to close those before dawn. He explains that artillery will provide covering fire to mask the sounds of your work and distract enemy attention. A Lewis gun team will be positioned to provide covering fire if you're discovered. If flares go up, freeze in place rather than running, which only draws fire. The equipment is prepared. Spools of barbed wire, wooden stakes, mauls wrapped in cloth to deaden the sound, wire cutters to remove damaged sections. Each man also carries his rifle and ammunition, plus grenades for emergency defense. As darkness falls, final preparations are made. Faces are blackened with burnt cork to reduce visibility. Anything that might reflect light or make noise is secured. The password and response for the night are issued to help identify friendlies in the darkness. Just before midnight, you go over the top. Leaving the trench is a surreal experience. After days of living below ground level, the open space of no man's land feels dangerously exposed. You crawl on your belly through a sap, a narrow trench extending toward enemy lines, then spread out in the darkness. No man's land is a nightmarish landscape. The ground is cratered from countless shells, creating a lunar surface of holes filled with stagnant water. Barbed wire, both broken and intact, creates metal thickets that can trap the unwary, and everywhere lie the dead. Some recent, others decayed to skeletons, impossible to recover in the constant crossfire. The work is painfully slow. Each movement must be deliberate and silent. The wire is unwound carefully, new stakes driven with muffled taps rather than proper blows. Damaged sections are cut away, new wire strung in its place. All this done by touch more than sight, in near total darkness, broken occasionally by distant flares. A flare goes up from the German lines, bathing the landscape in harsh white light. Everyone freezes instantly, becoming part of the landscape. The light lingers for agonizing seconds before fading. You resume work, fingers fumbling with cold and tension. Halfway through the task, disaster strikes. A man to your right gets tangled in the wire. In trying to free himself, he makes too much noise. A German machine gun opens up, sweeping the area with bullets that crack overhead and kick up dirt around you. "Down! Stay down!" hisses the sergeant. The Lewis gun from your trench returns fire, giving covering fire. The German gun shifts its attention, allowing your party to crawl back toward your lines, all except one man who lies motionless, caught in the wire he was repairing. Back in the trench, the roll call confirms one man missing, presumed killed. The lieutenant looks grim, but unsurprised. Wiring parties always take casualties. The work is essential, but lethal. We'll try again tomorrow night, he says simply. Different section. This is the cold calculus of trench warfare. Missions must be completed regardless of losses. The wire is your first line of defense against enemy raids and attacks. Without it, you're vulnerable to infiltration. Men will die repairing it, but more would die if it failed. Dawn stand to comes with red-rimmed eyes and bone-deep exhaustion. The night's events replay in your mind. Could you have done something differently? Saved the man who was lost? The veterans say not to think this way. It leads to paralysis or recklessness, both deadly on the front line. Morning brings a new threat, a German airplane flying low over your sector, the distinctive black crosses visible on its wings. Observation aircraft are the eyes of artillery, spotting targets and correcting fire. If it sees troop concentrations or identifies command posts, shells will soon follow. Take cover, comes the order, though there's little extra cover to be had in the trenches. Men press into dugouts and traverse corners, minimizing exposure. The Lewis guns, light machine guns that can be fired from the shoulder or a bipod, are brought to bear, tracking the aircraft. They're not designed as anti-aircraft weapons, but occasionally bring down low-flying planes. More often, they simply encourage pilots to keep their distance. Machine guns are the definitive weapon of trench warfare. The British Army primarily uses the Vickers, a heavy water-cooled gun that can fire 450 rounds per minute continuously for hours if properly maintained. It requires a crew of 6 to 8 men to operate effectively and is typically positioned in specially constructed emplacements with good fields of fire across no man's land. The lighter Lewis gun is more mobile, usable by infantry for attacks and defence. It has a distinctive circular magazine on top and can fire about 550 rounds per minute, though it overheats more quickly than the water-cooled Vickers. German machine guns are even more feared. The Maxim 08 is similar to the British Vickers, but employed in greater numbers, especially early in the war. The Germans position their guns to create interlocking fields of fire, ensuring no approach to their trenches goes uncovered. These weapons transformed warfare. A single machine gun can stop hundreds of attacking infantry, turning even the bravest charge into a suicidal advance through sheets of bullets. They're why frontal assaults are so costly and why the war has bogged down into trench stalemate. The airplane passes without incident, but the morning is broken by a different kind of attack, a trench mortar bombardment followed by a German raiding party. They hit a section of trench about 200 yards from your position, a brief, violent clash of grenades, bayonets and pistols in the confined space. The raid is repulsed, but not before the Germans capture 2 prisoners and kill several defenders. Prisoners are valuable sources of intelligence. They'll be interrogated about unit identifications, troop strengths, and planned operations. This is why raids occur so frequently. Both sides constantly need updated information about their opponents. After the raid, tension remains high all day. Raids often precede larger attacks, probing for weaknesses and gathering final intelligence. Every man is more alert, watching the German lines for signs of preparation. Artillery exchanges increase in intensity. The familiar ranging shots of morning hate expand into sustained bombardment of rear areas, targeting approach routes, command posts, and artillery positions. Your own guns reply vigorously, suggesting they've identified valuable targets. In the afternoon, the company commander calls officers and NCOs for a briefing. When they return, the news spreads quickly. You're going to raid the German trenches tonight. Your section will provide covering fire while another goes over the top. Preparations begin immediately. The raiding party, 12 men and an officer, clean their weapons meticulously and blacken all metal parts to prevent reflection. They're issued extra grenades and trench knives, short, vicious blades designed for close-quarter fighting in the confined spaces of enemy trenches. "Mills bombs, sir? Or rifles?" asks a corporal, referring to the two main types of attack plan. "Mills bombs," the lieutenant replies. "We want prisoners, not a body count." This determines the approach. With Mills bombs, the standard British hand grenade, the raiders will move quickly to the German wire, clear paths through it quietly, then rush the trench, throwing grenades ahead of them to clear the way. They'll grab prisoners and documents, then withdraw before German reinforcements arrive. Your role as the covering party is crucial. You'll man the fire step with rifles and Lewis guns, ready to provide covering fire if the raiders are discovered prematurely or during their withdrawal. You'll also watch for German counterattacks from other sections of their line. As evening approaches, tension ratchets higher. Men write letters just in case or check equipment repeatedly. Veterans affect casualness, but their tight expressions betray the strain. Raids are chaotic, violent affairs where plans rarely survive contact with the enemy. An hour before the scheduled raid, British artillery begins a deliberate bombardment of German lines, not the sections to be raided, which would only alert defenders, but areas to either side, drawing attention and reinforcements away from the targets. The raiders make final preparations. Some take off their identity discs, leaving one with a friend in case they don't return. Others remove badges of rank. Officers are prime targets for enemy fire. All ensure their weapons are in perfect working order and grenades easily accessible. "Remember," the officer in charge tells them, "we need at least 2 prisoners, and if you get hit, don't make noise. Better to die quiet than get everyone killed." It's a harsh truth of raiding. Wounded men who cry out endanger the entire party. Some raiders carry morphine specifically to silence badly wounded comrades if necessary. At 11:30 p.m, the raiders go over the top, disappearing into the darkness of no man's land. Your section takes position on the fire step, rifles ready, eyes straining to follow their progress. For long minutes, nothing happens. Then comes the distinctive crump of grenades, followed by the chatter of machine guns and shouts in German. "Fire," orders your sergeant, and the covering party opens up, sending bullets just over the raiders' position to discourage German reinforcements. A very light, a bright flare shoots up from the German line, illuminating no man's land with harsh light. You can see figures moving, some falling, others throwing objects, grenades, into the German trench. The firefight intensifies. 3 minutes later, shadows detach from the German parapet, moving back toward your lines, the raiders returning. They drag 2 struggling figures with them, prisoners, while others provide covering fire or carry wounded comrades. "Cease fire," comes the order as they near your wire. "Let them through." The raiders tumble back into the trench, bringing their prisoners, young, terrified-looking Germans, and 3 wounded comrades. A head count reveals 2 men missing, presumed killed in the German trench. The raid is considered a success. 2 prisoners, identifiable by their uniform insignia as members of a Bavarian regiment, plus documents taken from a dugout that might contain valuable intelligence. The cost, 2 dead, 3 wounded, is deemed acceptable by the officers, though not by the friends of those lost. The prisoners are quickly taken to the rear for interrogation. The wounded receive first aid and morphine before being evacuated to the dressing station. The survivors drink rum rations with shaking hands, coming down from the intense adrenaline of combat. Combat in the trenches is nothing like the heroic charges depicted in recruiting posters. It's close, desperate fighting in confined spaces, often in near darkness. Bayonets are less useful than shorter weapons. Trench clubs, knives, even sharpened entrenching tools. Grenades are thrown around corners before men advance. Machine guns fire down straight sections of trench, cutting down anyone caught in their path. The day after a raid is quieter than usual, both sides recovering, assessing damage, replacing casualties, but the lull never lasts long. By mid-morning, German artillery begins a systematic bombardment that has a different quality from normal harassing fire. "They're getting ready for something," says an old sergeant, listening to the pattern of shells. "Not just revenge for last night, something bigger." The warning spreads down the line. Extra ammunition is distributed. Reserve troops move closer to the front. Everyone cleans weapons and checks gas masks with extra care. The signs are clear to experienced eyes. The Germans are preparing an attack. Around noon, the pattern of shells changes. Instead of the high explosive rounds hitting your trenches and rear areas, a new sound emerges, a dull plop rather than the usual crack of bursting shells. Gas! The cry comes from multiple lookouts simultaneously. Gas alert! The alarm rattles down the line, a distinctive pattern beaten on empty shell casings hung as improvised bells. Men scramble for gas masks, performing the drill practiced countless times. Mask out of bag, shaken to remove any debris, placed over face, straps tightened, breathe out hard to clear the mask, check seal. You complete the drill in seconds, the rubber mask clinging uncomfortably to your face. The eyepiece is already beginning to fog. Through the distorted glass, you see a greenish-yellow cloud rolling slowly across no man's land, pushed by a light breeze directly toward your position. Chlorine gas, heavier than air, flows into trenches and shell holes where it concentrates, displacing oxygen. Without protection, men die in agony, drowning as the gas burns their lungs and causes fluid buildup. Even with masks, extended exposure is dangerous as filters become saturated or seals leak. For 30 minutes you wait as the gas cloud passes over and through your position. Breathing is difficult through the filter. The mask is hot, uncomfortable, inducing a feeling of claustrophobia. Communication is nearly impossible, reduced to hand signals and muffled shouts. Some men panic, tearing at their masks despite training. Others hold them down until the impulse passes. A few with damaged or ill-fitting masks begin to cough and choke as gas seeps in. They're helped to aid posts where medical orderlies administer oxygen and treatments that may or may not save their lungs. As the gas dissipates, a new threat emerges. German infantry follow the cloud, wearing their own distinctive gas masks with long filter canisters. They've timed their attack to coincide with the gas, hoping to catch defenders in disarray or without functioning masks. Stand to, masks on. The order passes down the line as men take positions on the fire step, awkwardly aiming rifles while still wearing gas masks. The machine guns open up first, their distinctive hammering audible even through the masks. They sweep no man's land, catching German troops in the open. Many fall, but others keep coming, reaching your wire. Fire. The order comes muffled but clear enough. You aim through fogged eyepieces at grey figures cutting through wire entanglements and squeeze the trigger. The rifle's recoil jolts your shoulder. You work the bolt, eject the spent casing, chamber another round, aim, fire again. The Germans who reach the wire throw grenades into your trench, stick bombs with long wooden handles that let them hurl the explosives farther. You duck as one explodes nearby, sending fragments whining through the air. The attack falters under combined rifle and machine gun fire. Germans who made it to the wire fall back or surrender. Those caught in the open take cover in shell holes, becoming snipers who take shots at any movement in your line. For hours, this stalemate continues, occasional shots from both sides, wounded men crying in no man's land, the lingering effects of gas making breathing difficult even after masks are removed. Only at dusk do stretcher parties venture out under Red Cross flags to collect wounded from both sides. The day's action results in dozens of casualties across your battalion, some from gas, others from bullets and shrapnel. German losses appear heavier. Attacking across open ground is always costlier than defending prepared positions. As night falls, the wounded are evacuated down communication trenches to aid stations. The dead are buried in small cemeteries just behind the lines, crosses marking their graves. Chaplains say brief services when conditions allow, but often bodies are simply placed in the ground with minimal ceremony, the needs of the living taking precedence. The psychological toll of combat accumulates with each engagement. Men react differently. Some become fatalistic, accepting whatever comes with resigned humour. Others grow increasingly anxious, jumping at every sound, unable to sleep. A few develop the 1,000-yard stare, a blank expression that reveals minds partially detached from unbearable reality. Officers watch for signs of shell shock, the Great War's term for what later generations would call combat stress reaction or PTSD. Symptoms range from mild anxiety to complete catatonia, uncontrollable trembling, inability to speak, or hysterical blindness. Severe cases are evacuated to special hospitals, though many commanders still view it as simple cowardice rather than legitimate psychological injury. After the gas attack, a young private in your section sits mute, staring at nothing, jerking violently at the slightest noise. The medical officer examines him briefly. "Another one gone," he says to the company commander. "I'll send him back, but they're getting stricter about shell shock cases. High command thinks it's contagious." He's not entirely wrong. Fear, like courage, spreads among men in close quarters. Veterans work to contain both panic and recklessness in newer soldiers, enforcing a middle path of cautious professionalism that offers the best chance of survival. That night, exhausted from combat and the strain of the gas attack, sleep comes in brief, troubled intervals. Dreams are vivid and violent, common among frontline troops. You wake repeatedly, unsure for disorienting moments where you are, until the familiar sounds and smells of the trench return you to reality. The next day brings the cycle of stand-to, work parties and meals once more, but with the added task of clearing battle damage. Shell holes must be filled, damaged wire replaced, bloodstains covered with fresh earth to maintain morale. The war machine resets itself, preparing for the next engagement. Late in the afternoon, welcome news arrives. Your battalion will be relieved tonight, moving to support trenches for 4 days before rotating to rest billets behind the lines. The prospect of hot food, proper sleep, and relative safety lifts spirits noticeably. Relief arrives after dark. Fresh troops from another battalion of your regiment, guided by officers who spent the day reconnoitering the trench layout. The handover is methodical. Section by section, the newcomers replace your men, receiving briefings on recent enemy activity, dangerous areas, and ongoing work. You find yourself explaining to a young private who looks no more than 17 the best spots for sentry duty, which parts of the trench draw the most fire, where German snipers are believed to operate. He listens with wide eyes, nodding too frequently, clearly terrified but trying not to show it too. The Bavarians opposite are decent sorts, you find yourself saying. They don't shoot stretcher bearers or ration parties if they can help it, but watch out for trench mortars around dawn. They like to wake us up with those. It strikes you as surreal. A month ago, you knew nothing of this world. Now you're passing on wisdom as if you've lived here forever. The trenches age men rapidly, turning boys into veterans in weeks rather than years. With handover complete, your company forms up in the communication trench for the march to the rear. Movement is slow in the narrow twisting passage, but safer than crossing open ground, even at night. The distance isn't great, perhaps 2 miles, but trenches make it a journey of hours rather than minutes. Gradually, the sounds of the front line fade behind you. The sporadic crack of rifles gives way to deeper quiet, broken only by the rumble of transport and artillery operating in the rear areas. The air smells cleaner, less tainted by cordite and death. Support trenches are wider, deeper, and better constructed than the front line. Dugouts are larger, some with wooden bunks and primitive stoves. The constant tension of imminent attack eases, allowing men to stand straighter, speak more normally, smoke without cupping cigarettes to hide the glow. For now, at least, you've survived the worst that trench warfare can offer. The daily artillery, the snipers, the raids, the gas. But in 4 days, or perhaps a week, you'll return to the front where these dangers wait with infinite patience for fresh victims. This is the grinding cycle of the Western Front. Rotate forward, endure, rotate back, recover, repeat. A machine that consumes men and material at a staggering rate without significant movement of the front line. A war of attrition where victory goes not to the most skilled or brave, but to whoever can sustain the bleeding longest. As you settle into a relatively spacious dugout in the support trench, sharing cigarettes with comrades who survived the front-line rotation, the conversation turns to home, to plans after the war, to anything but the immediate past or future. This too is part of the soldier's art. Living in the narrow present, neither dwelling on what's happened nor anticipating what's to come. "Mail tomorrow," says a lance corporal, changing the subject from a particularly grim reminiscence, and hot showers if the boilers are working. These simple pleasures, a letter from home, hot water, food that isn't bully beef, become the milestones by which trench time is measured. They sustain men through the unsustainable, providing just enough humanity to keep going in inhuman conditions. You think of the front line, just 2 miles away but seemingly another world. The men who relieved you are standing to now, watching the darkness for signs of threat, living the same cycle you've temporarily escaped. Some won't be there when you return, replaced by fresh faces who will look to you as a veteran, a guide to survival in the trenches. For now, though, there's a chance to rest, to let some of the tension ease from mind and body, to eat without listening for incoming shells, to sleep without a rifle within arm's reach. Small mercies in a merciless war, but precious nonetheless. After 4 days in support trenches, your battalion moves further back to a rest area, a small French village 5 miles behind the front. The transition feels almost dreamlike. One day you're in a world of mud and death, the next walking on cobblestone streets where buildings, though damaged, still stand intact. Rest areas are relative sanctuaries. The distant thunder of artillery remains audible, but the immediate danger has passed. Here, men can sleep in barns or billets rather than dugouts, eat hot food prepared in proper field kitchens, and briefly remember what normal life feels like. Your platoon is assigned to a partially damaged farmhouse. The roof leaks in places and windows are patched with canvas, but it offers solid walls and real floors. Luxuries after weeks of earthen trenches. The farmer and his wife still occupy part of the building, coexisting uneasily with the soldiers who rotate through their home in endless succession. The first priority is cleanliness. A makeshift bathhouse has been set up in a barn with wooden tubs and hot water heated in copper boilers. Men wait in long queues for their turn, eager to be free of the trench filth embedded in their skin and clothes. When your turn comes, you strip off uniform layers stiff with mud and sweat. Attendants take your clothing for delousing, a process involving steam heat that kills the ever-present lice but does little for the smell. You step into water that quickly turns grey but feels like heaven regardless. "First proper wash in 23 days, says the man in the next tub, scrubbing vigorously at ingrained dirt. Counted every one of them. Clean and wearing fresh undergarments from your pack, you collect your deloused uniform. It's still worn and stained, but temporarily free of parasites. This cleanliness won't last long once you return to the trenches, but for now, it's a blessed relief from constant itching. The company assembles for the first hot meal in weeks, stew with actual chunks of meat and vegetables, bread baked that morning, and tea served in mugs rather than canteen cups. Men eat slowly, savouring each bite after the monotony of trench rations. After the meal comes mail call, letters and packages that accumulated during your time at the front. The company clerk calls names, distributing precious links to the world beyond the war. Some men receive multiple letters, others hear nothing and mask their disappointment with forced indifference. Your name is called and you collect 2 letters, one from your mother, another from a friend back home. You tuck them away to read privately later. Letters are intimate connections to normal life, best enjoyed away from the crowd. With basic needs addressed, food, cleanliness, shelter, men settle into the rhythms of rest period. The schedule is more relaxed but not idle. Mornings still begin with roll call and inspection. Equipment must be cleaned and repaired. There are training sessions to incorporate lessons from recent frontline experience and prepare for the next rotation. But there are also precious hours of free time, opportunities for the simple pleasures that make the war temporarily bearable. In a corner of the farmyard, a group has organised a football match using a ball sent from home and jackets as goalposts. They play with unexpected energy despite their recent exhaustion, cheered on by spectators backing different platoons. 5 francs on B Company, shouts a sergeant waving a crumpled note. Gambling is technically prohibited but overlooked by officers who understand its value for morale. Nearby, other men write letters, play cards, or simply sit in the weak sunshine, faces tilted upward like flowers seeking light. These quiet moments are when the closest friendships form, bonds stronger than those in civilian life forged in shared extremity. Thomas sits beside you on an empty ammunition crate, carefully cleaning his rifle despite being away from the front. Some habits become too ingrained to break. "Got family, lad?" he asks, not looking up from his work. You tell him about your parents, a sister, the small town where you grew up. He nods, sharing his own story. A wife and young son in Manchester, a job in a textile factory that he'll likely never return to, even if he survives. The war has changed him too much. "Strange thing," he says, squinting at the rifle barrel for any remaining dirt. "I can't write them about what it's really like. Try to, but the words never come right. How do you explain this to people who haven't seen it?" This is a common sentiment. The gap between front experience and home understanding seems unbridgeable. Men write cheerful, sanitized accounts that bear little resemblance to reality, protecting loved ones from truths too harsh to share. In the evening, informal entertainment begins. A corporal with a decent voice sings music hall songs while another accompanies on a battered harmonica. Men join in choruses, momentarily united by familiar melodies that remind them of home. The songs range from sentimental ballads about sweethearts waiting faithfully to ribald marching tunes with lyrics that would shock civilian ears. Soldiers' songs often use humor, however dark, to process experiences too grim for direct expression. If you want to find the old battalion, I know where they are. I know where they are. If you want to find the old battalion, I know where they are. They're hanging on the old barbed wire. I've seen 'em, hanging on the old barbed wire. I've seen 'em, hanging on the old barbed wire. The lyrics are macabre, but the tune is catchy and men sing it without apparent distress. Gallows humor is a crucial coping mechanism, allowing indirect acknowledgement of fears too powerful to face directly. As darkness falls, someone produces a bottle of cheap French wine, purchased from a local farmer at inflated prices. It passes from hand to hand, each man taking a small sip, momentarily bound in communion that transcends military hierarchy. In the soft glow of lanterns, faces look younger, less weathered by war. Men speak of home, of plans for when the fighting ends, of small dreams that sustain them through the nightmare of the trenches. Going to open a tobacconist's shop, says a lance corporal passing the bottle. Nice little place on a corner. Always wanted that. Farm for me, another replies. Somewhere quiet. No more bloody noise. These conversations happen in every rest period, rituals of hope that few fully believe in but maintain regardless. The mortality rate is too high for confidence, but planning for the future is itself an act of defiance against the present. Not all coping mechanisms are so healthy. Some men drink whatever alcohol they can find to the point of insensibility. Others seek comfort with local women despite official discouragement of fraternization. A few develop addictions to the morphine meant for battlefield wounds. Officers generally overlook minor infractions during rest periods, understanding that men need release from the unrelenting pressure of the front. Major violations still bring punishment, but the standard of discipline flexes to accommodate human needs. Religion provides comfort for many. The battalion chaplain holds services in a partially damaged church, offering familiar rituals and the promise of meaning beyond the senseless slaughter. Men who never attended church at home find themselves drawn to these services, seeking transcendence or simply community. Some find solace in superstition rather than formal religion. Lucky charms proliferate, coins that stopped bullets, playing cards that predicted survival, pieces of shrapnel that struck close but didn't kill. Men develop personal rituals, always putting the left boot on first, touching wood before going on patrol, carrying pictures of loved ones over the heart. Your own ritual is simpler. Each morning and night you touch the small St. Christopher medal your mother gave you before you left. You're not certain you believe it provides protection, but the connection to home comforts regardless. Superstitious lot soldiers, observes a lieutenant passing by a group comparing talismans. But then, in a world this random, who can blame them? The randomness of death in the trenches is perhaps its most psychologically challenging aspect. No amount of skill, courage, or caution guarantees survival when artillery shells fall indiscriminately or gas drifts with changing winds. In such circumstances, the illusion of control provided by lucky charms becomes almost necessary for sanity. Another form of coping emerges in the creative works produced during rest periods. Men sketch in notebooks, write poetry, or craft objects from battlefield debris, shell casings transformed into vases, bullet pencils, rings made from shrapnel fragments. This trench art serves multiple purposes. It passes time, creates mementos to send home, and transforms the instruments of death into objects of beauty. A small victory over the destruction surrounding its creators. A corporal in your section is particularly skilled in engraving shell casings with intricate floral patterns using nothing but a nail and patience. He works on one now, the soft tapping a soothing backdrop to evening conversations. Sending this one to my girl, he explains, showing you the half-completed design. Tells her I'm thinking of her without saying anything about... He gestures vaguely toward the front, the sound of distant guns punctuating his unfinished thought. Packages from home are opened and shared, their contents distributed with generosity that might surprise those who knew these men in civilian life. Privacy and personal property become flexible concepts in the communal living of military service. A cake from someone's mother becomes a feast for an entire section, each man taking a small piece regardless of whether they know the recipient. The sharing goes beyond food. Books and newspapers pass from hand to hand until they disintegrate. Cigarettes, currency of the trenches, are offered freely during times of plenty and carefully rationed when scarce, but always with an understanding that no one goes without if others have. This communal spirit represents one of the war's few positive aspects, the deep bonds formed between men of different backgrounds who might never have connected in civilian life. Class barriers erode in the face of shared danger. Regional antagonisms fade when everyone faces the same enemy. Never spoke to toffs before the war, admits a former coal miner, nodding toward a group of officers. Now there's that lieutenant, proper gentleman, Oxford and all, saved my life at Lewes, carried me half a mile under fire when I took shrapnel in the leg. The lieutenant in question, overhearing, looks embarrassed, but pleased. You'd have done the same, he says simply. This is often true. Acts of extraordinary courage become almost commonplace, not from any inherent heroism, but from the bonds between men who cannot bear to let their comrades down. Many medals are earned not in attacks against the enemy, but in rescuing wounded friends from no man's land or carrying messages through artillery barrages. As night deepens, men drift towards sleeping quarters. The farmhouse offers real straw mattresses, luxury beyond imagining after trench dugouts. Men settle in, some reading letters by candlelight, others already asleep, a few softly conversing about everything except the war. In private, you finally open your letters. Your mother writes of home, mundane details of neighbours, local events, rationing difficulties, carefully avoiding anything that might add to your burdens. Between the lines, you read her worry, her desperate hope for your safety. The second letter brings unexpected emotion. Your friend describes a mutual acquaintance recently returned from the front, wounded severely enough for discharge but alive. The familiar name connects your current reality to your pre-war life, bridging worlds that have grown increasingly separate in your mind. Letters finished, you tuck them into your tunic pocket, close to your heart. They'll be read repeatedly in the coming weeks, especially during difficult moments at the front. Words from home provide anchors to normality when the world consists only of mud, fear, and death. Sleep comes easily in the relative quiet and safety. For once, dreams might be peaceful rather than replaying trench horrors in endless variation. The body begins healing from strains and minor injuries accumulated during frontline service. The mind, too, recovers slightly from constant vigilance, though never completely. The next morning brings a welcome announcement. The rest period will include a concert party tonight. These entertainment troupes, composed of soldiers with theatrical or musical talent, travel between rest areas performing variety shows that briefly transport audiences away from the war. The day passes in training exercises and equipment maintenance, but anticipation builds for the evening performance. A barn has been cleared and basic staging constructed from ammunition boxes and planks. Benches made from similar materials provide seating for the audience. After dinner, men file in, finding places on benches or standing around the edges of the improvised theatre. The atmosphere is festive, with smuggled alcohol discreetly shared and cigarettes glowing in the dimness. The show begins with the regimental band playing popular tunes. Then come the comedy sketches, some gently mocking officers with their permission, others parodying the absurdities of army life. Men who've spent weeks in grim silence laugh until tears come, releasing tension they didn't fully recognize they carried. A sergeant with a remarkable tenor voice sings, "Keep the home fires burning," bringing momentary solemnity before a raucous music hall number restores levity. The finale features the entire company in a patriotic song that, despite its propaganda elements, genuinely moves many listeners. For 2 precious hours, the war recedes. Men are transported to music halls and theatres of home, to evenings of simple entertainment untainted by the shadow of mortality. They applaud enthusiastically, calling for encores that stretch the performance well beyond its planned duration. Walking back to billets afterward, the mood remains lighter than it has been since arriving at the rest area. Men hum snatches of songs or repeat jokes from the sketches. The psychological value of such entertainment far exceeds its modest production values. "Wish we could have something like that at the front," says a young private. "Imagine putting on a show in the trenches." "Germans would enjoy it too much," someone replies dryly. "They'd stop shelling just to listen, and then where would the war be?" The joke draws laughter disproportionate to its humour, another release of tension, another small victory over circumstances that would otherwise overwhelm. In your billet, conversation continues softly as men prepare for sleep. Topics range widely. Football teams supported in civilian life, favourite foods mothers make, first jobs, girls left behind. The talk is deliberately normal, creating a bubble of ordinariness in the extraordinary circumstances of war. "Strange to think," says Thomas as he settles onto his mattress. "People at home just going about their business, working, eating, sleeping in proper beds. Seems like another world now." It does indeed. The civilian life you left behind has acquired a dreamlike quality, less real somehow than the harsh actualities of the trenches. You wonder, as many soldiers do, whether you can ever fully return to that world even if you survive physically intact. That's a concern for another day, though. For now, there's the simple pleasure of a straw mattress instead of mud, a roof that mostly keeps out rain, and the absence of imminent danger. These small comforts, once taken for granted, now seem like extravagant luxuries. Sleep comes easily, deeper than any since leaving the front. Around you, men breathe the slow rhythms of genuine rest, temporarily unburdened by the vigilance required for survival in the trenches. For these brief days at least, the war loosens its grip slightly, allowing glimpses of the humanity it otherwise consumes. Tomorrow will bring more training, equipment inspections, and preparation for the return to the front that inevitably awaits. But for tonight, there's peace of a sort, friendship, and the small sustaining pleasures that make the unbearable briefly bearable. The rest period draws to its inevitable close, 7 days behind the lines, a breath of normality between immersions in the abnormal world of the trenches. The final day brings a strange mixture of emotions, reluctance to return to danger, yet also a quiet readiness. The trenches, for all their horrors, have become a familiar environment. In an odd way, they now feel more natural than the civilian world left behind. Morning begins with equipment inspection, more thorough than usual before returning to the front. Officers check rifles meticulously, ensuring each bolt moves smoothly. Each sight is properly aligned. Gas masks receive special attention. A faulty seal or clogged filter means death when chlorine clouds roll across no man's land. Pack extra socks, advises the sergeant, moving between men as they prepare their kit. Weather report says rain coming. Don't want trench foot keeping you from our lovely accommodations up the line. His gallows humour draws tired smiles. After a week of relative comfort, the prospect of returning to mud and danger weighs heavily. Yet few men would admit to fear or reluctance. Professional pride and concern for comrades override personal misgivings. The company quartermaster distributes fresh supplies, ammunition, rations, medical items. Each man receives an extra bandage packet and iodine ampules for wound treatment. These small additions carry an unspoken message about expected casualties that no one acknowledges openly. "Here the Bavarians got relieved," says a corporal, checking his ammunition pouches. "Saxons opposite us now, according to intelligence." This matters. Different German units have different reputations. Bavarians are considered tough but fair opponents who generally respect unofficial truces for ration delivery or casualty evacuation. Saxon troops are less predictable. The change means adjusted expectations and heightened vigilance until the new opponent's patterns become clear. After breakfast, there's time for final letters home. Men write with the particular care of those facing imminent danger, choosing words that might be their last. Some include small tokens, pressed flowers from French fields, sketches of rest billets, trench art crafted during quiet hours. These tangible connections to their lives matter more than words can express. You write your own letter, struggling to convey experiences that seem increasingly untranslatable to those who haven't lived them. How can you explain the strange brotherhood of the trenches, the moments of unexpected beauty amid devastation, the way time distorts under constant threat? In the end, you write mostly of mundane details, the weather, the food, reassurances of your well-being that are partial truths at best. As noon approaches, the battalion forms up for the march back to the line. Packs are adjusted, equipment checked one final time. There's less conversation now, each man turning inward to find whatever mental preparation serves him best. The chaplain moves among the ranks, offering brief words of encouragement or prayer to those who welcome them. Some men touch religious medals or crosses, others perform personal rituals developed over months of war. Thomas straightens his cap at precisely the same angle. He's worn it through every rotation without casualty, a superstition he'd never acknowledge but maintains faithfully. "Easy march today," announces the lieutenant, consulting his map. 7 miles to support trenches, overnight there, then forward to the line tomorrow evening. 7 miles would be nothing in civilian life, a pleasant afternoon walk. In military formation, carrying full equipment weighing upwards of 60 pounds, it becomes a test of endurance. Add the psychological weight of moving toward rather than away from danger, and the burden multiplies. The company moves out along a rural road lined with poplars. The trees still bear leaves, incongruously alive amid a landscape increasingly scarred by war. Birdsong accompanies the rhythmic trudge of boots on packed earth, another discord between natural beauty and human destruction that characterizes the Western Front. You march in the middle of the column, finding the familiar cadence that distributes weight most efficiently and conserves energy. Around you, other men do the same, their faces set in expressions of resigned determination. There's comfort in the shared purpose. The collective movement toward a duty none would choose individually but all accept collectively. The road gradually deteriorates as you approach the front. Shell holes appear with increasing frequency, some filled with stagnant water where frogs have improbably established themselves. Nature adapts with remarkable persistence, finding niches within human devastation. Military traffic increases, ambulances moving rearward with wounded, ammunition wagons heading forward, dispatch riders on motorcycles weaving between columns. The machinery of war grows denser around you, its components interlocking in complex logistics few individual soldiers fully comprehend. Rest stops come at regular intervals, 10 minutes each hour. Men drop gratefully to grassy roadside verges, shedding packs momentarily, passing canteens, sharing cigarettes. These brief respites highlight how quickly the body reacclimatizes to comfort and resists returning to hardship. During one such halt, a flight of British aircraft passes overhead, heading toward German lines. The Bristol F-2 fighters fly in tight formation, their engines drone a reassuring reminder of growing Allied air superiority. Men wave spontaneously, though the pilots are unlikely to notice from their altitude. "Rather be up there than down here," remarks a young private, watching the planes diminish into the distance. "Not me," replies a veteran corporal. "No trenches, but nowhere to hide either. And if your engine quits..." He makes a whistling sound, followed by a graphic crashing gesture. The war exists in 3 dimensions now: below ground in trenches and mines, on the surface in traditional infantry combat, and increasingly in the air where observation balloons and aircraft struggle for advantage. Each domain has its unique dangers, its specific forms of courage. By mid-afternoon, the landscape shows more extensive war damage. Few intact buildings remain, most reduced to skeletal walls or mere foundations. Fields lie fallow or cratered beyond recognition. Trees stand as blackened stumps or lean at impossible angles, their root systems disrupted by explosions. The sounds of the front grow more distinct, the rhythmic thump of artillery, the distant chatter of machine guns. These noises once provoked immediate anxiety. Now they register as environmental features like weather or birdsong, requiring acknowledgement but not necessarily fear. Late afternoon brings the battalion to a crossroads where military police direct traffic. The MPs wear distinctive red caps and maintain order with a mixture of authority and practicality. They check the lieutenant's orders before waving the company forward toward a communication trench that marks the beginning of the fortified zone. "End of the road, quite literally," observes Thomas as the column halts. "From here on, we're back to trench life." The communication trench descends gradually from the surface world to the subterranean network that soldiers inhabit. It's well constructed, with solid revetments supporting the walls and duckboards elevating feet above potential water. This major artery receives regular maintenance, unlike smaller trenches that deteriorate between rotations. Moving in single file, the company enters this transitional space between worlds. Daylight diminishes as the trench deepens. Conversations fade, replaced by the focused concentration needed to navigate with full equipment in confined space. The war reasserts its presence with each downward step. The journey through communication trenches to support positions takes nearly 2 hours, though the actual distance is relatively short. The zigzag design that protects against enfilade fire also multiplies travel time. Men move carefully, mindful that the visible portion of the journey has made them potential targets for German artillery observers. Support trenches, when reached, offer reasonable accommodation by front standards. Dugouts excavated into trench walls provide shelter against all but direct hits. Some feature bunks with straw-filled mattresses, small stoves for warmth, even crude tables and chairs salvaged from destroyed villages. "Home, sweet home," says a sergeant ironically, directing men to their assigned dugouts. "Get settled, then hot rations at 7. Stand to at dawn tomorrow, then maintenance duties until we move up tomorrow night." This intermediate position, behind the front line but still within artillery range, serves multiple purposes. It allows gradual reacclimatization to trench conditions, provides a staging area for rotating units, and maintains reserve forces close enough to reinforce front trenches if attacked. The evening passes quietly. Men organize sleeping spaces, clean equipment muddied during the march, write final letters before entering the communication blackout of the front line. A portable gramophone plays somewhere down the trench, its tinny rendition of a popular waltz incongruously elegant amid military surroundings. After rations, hot stew and bread delivered in insulated containers from field kitchens, the company commander calls officers and senior NCOs for briefing. They return with information that passes quickly through the ranks. The sector you're entering has been relatively quiet, with minimal casualties during the previous battalion's rotation. Artillery exchanges occur mainly at dawn and dusk, with occasional night patrols but no major raids from either side. This qualifies as good news in the relative scale of trench warfare. A quiet sector means better odds of survival, though veterans know that conditions can change rapidly with the arrival of new enemy units or shifts in high command strategy. As night deepens, men settle into the rhythm of support trench life. Sentry rotations are established, though less intensively than at the front. Quiet conversations continue in dugouts, most focusing on immediate concerns rather than larger questions of the war or its meaning. In combat zones, philosophical reflection rarely extends beyond the next day's survival. You find yourself in a dugout with Thomas and 4 others from your section, the close quarters creating forced intimacy that nonetheless provides comfort. These men have become more familiar than family in some ways, their habits and personalities known in the particular detail that shared danger creates. "Think this rotation will be quiet?" asks a young replacement, new to the front and seeking reassurance. "Never predict," Thomas replies, not unkindly. "Just take each day as it comes. Do your job, watch out for your mates, keep your head down when it makes sense to." This simple wisdom encapsulates much of what experienced soldiers learn. The war's scale and complexity exceed individual comprehension or control. Focus narrows to immediate influences, the few yards of trench you defend, the men directly beside you, the next hour or day rather than weeks or months. Sleep comes easier in support trenches than at the front, though still broken by sentry rotations and habitual vigilance that never fully subsides. Dreams often blend memories of home with frontline experiences in disconcerting combinations that leave men disoriented upon waking. Dawn brings stand to, the universal ritual of trench warfare when all men occupy firing positions regardless of location in the trench system. This practice acknowledges the particular vulnerability of dawn and dusk transitions when changing light conditions favour attackers. After stand to comes breakfast, tea, bread, bacon for those lucky enough to be in support rather than front trenches. Men eat with the particular appreciation of those who know that comforts diminish with proximity to the enemy. By tomorrow they'll return to cold rations and limited cooking opportunities. The day passes in preparation for the final move forward. Equipment is checked again, ammunition distributed, trenches repaired where needed. A medical officer moves through the company, identifying men with early symptoms of illness or psychological strain who might become casualties if sent to the front. Hughes, Taylor, Wilson, report to the aid post, he instructs after inspections. Rest of you, carry on. The men named depart with mixed emotions: relief at temporary reprieve from frontline duty, concern about appearing weak before comrades, uncertainty about their status. They'll likely remain in support positions this rotation, performing necessary duties while recovering from their conditions. This pragmatic approach to human limitations represents an evolution in military thinking. Early in the war, any reluctance to advance brought accusations of cowardice, sometimes resulting in disciplinary action or even execution. Gradually, medical understanding of combat stress improved, leading to treatment rather than punishment for most cases. By late afternoon, final preparations begin for the move to front trenches. Extra rations are distributed, emergency supplies checked, specific assignments clarified. The complex choreography of trench rotation requires careful planning to maintain defensive integrity throughout the transition. "We move at dusk," confirms the lieutenant. 3rd platoon first, then headquarters, then 2nd and 1st. Full equipment, absolute silence during movement. The relief must be complete before midnight. As daylight fades, tension rises perceptibly. Support trenches, relatively safe by front standards, suddenly seem almost comfortable compared to what awaits. Men make final adjustments to equipment, checking that nothing will rattle or reflect light during movement. The march forward begins as planned, platoons moving separately through communication trenches toward their assigned positions. Progress is slow, the narrow passages requiring careful navigation, especially where recent shell damage has caused partial collapses. The sounds and smells of the front intensify with each forward yard. Artillery grows louder, small arms fire more distinct. The air carries notes of cordite, decaying matter, chloride of lime used to combat trench sanitation issues. These sensory markers announce proximity to the war's most active zone. Frontline trenches, when reached, appear much as you remember. Narrow, muddy passages with fire steps facing enemy lines, rudimentary dugouts offering minimal shelter, ever-present evidence of recent combat. The trench itself seems almost organic, constantly damaged and repaired, never quite the same from one rotation to the next. The relief process follows established protocol. Each section of trench is transferred individually, outgoing troops briefing their replacements on recent enemy activity, dangerous areas, working routines. Maps change hands, showing patrol routes, suspected sniper positions, weak points in wire defences. "They've been mortaring this section every morning around 5, explains an outgoing sergeant, pointing to a trench intersection. "Best keep movement minimal then. Oh, and their new sniper is good. Got Williams yesterday when he was only up for a second." Such practical information transfers save lives, preventing newcomers from repeating others' fatal mistakes. The institutional memory of the trench persists despite constant personnel changes, accumulated wisdom passing from rotation to rotation. By midnight, relief is complete. The outgoing battalion disappears down communication trenches toward their own rest period, leaving your company fully responsible for this section of the front. Sentry assignments begin immediately, with the most experienced men taking first watch, while others organize dugouts and equipment. Standing on the fire step, peering cautiously through a periscope at no man's land, you experience the peculiar sensation of returning home to a place you rationally fear and hate. The trenches, for all their misery, have become a known environment where roles and expectations are clear. The extraordinary has become ordinary through extended exposure. This psychological adaptation explains much about the trench soldier's experience. Men adjust to conditions that would have seemed impossible beforehand, finding routines within chaos, moments of calm amid danger, even occasional humour in absurdity. The human capacity for normalisation proves both a survival mechanism and a trap, enabling endurance while making the abnormal seem acceptable. In Your Dugout Between Sentry Rotations, Thomas captures this paradox while preparing a small stove for tea. Strangest thing, he muses, carefully shielding the flame from outside view. First time at the front, thought I'd never last a day. Now it's been 15 months, and sometimes I wonder if I'll remember how to live properly after, if there is an after. The question of after haunts many conversations in quiet moments. What remains of the men who entered this war? How will they reintegrate into peaceful society if they survive physically? The changes wrought by trench experience go beyond visible wounds, altering fundamental perceptions of normality, danger, and human capability. Some men express certainty that life will resume its previous course once the war ends. Others recognize more profound transformations that cannot be reversed. Most avoid the question entirely, focusing on immediate survival rather than uncertain futures. The night passes in the familiar rhythm of sentry duty, brief sleep, stand-to, and routine maintenance. By morning, the company has re-established itself fully in the front-line environment, individual soldiers slotting into roles shaped by months of similar rotations. Dawn brings the expected German artillery, predictable in its timing, if not its specific targets. Men take cover in dugouts or traverse corners, the veterans distinguished by their ability to identify shell types by sound and adjust their protection accordingly. When the barrage lifts, normal trench life resumes. Working parties repair damage, sentries maintain watch, runners carry messages between command posts. The machinery of trench warfare operates with remarkable consistency despite constant personnel changes and enemy action. For the individual soldier, this environment creates a peculiar mixture of extreme alertness and numbing routine. The body remains constantly ready for sudden threats while the mind settles into repetitive patterns that make the unbearable temporarily manageable. Thomas expresses this duality while checking wire defenses through a periscope. See that crater there, about 40 yards out. We lost Johnston there last rotation. Patrol ran into an ambush. He continues, scanning methodically. Voice matter of fact despite the content. Good news is, it's perfect cover for our next reconnaissance. Bad news is, Jerry knows that too. This balance between acknowledging danger and functioning despite it characterizes veteran soldiers. They neither ignore threats nor become paralyzed by them, instead incorporating risk assessment into ordinary decision-making while preserving emotional reserves for when they're most needed. Days pass in the front line, each similar yet never identical. Small variations acquire disproportionate significance in this confined world. A day without casualties becomes cause for quiet satisfaction. A letter from home brightens an otherwise monotonous rotation. An extra ration of rum acknowledges particularly difficult conditions. Relationships deepen further in the pressure cooker of frontline service. Men who shared rest billets now share imminent danger, reinforcing bonds already stronger than most civilian friendships. They develop wordless communication systems, intuitive understandings of each other's needs and capabilities, mutual trust that proves literally life-saving in combat situations. This brotherhood represents perhaps the sole positive aspect of trench warfare consistently identified by veterans after the war. When asked what they miss about military service, few mention the conditions, dangers, or even the sense of purpose. Instead, they cite the uniquely intense camaraderie rarely replicated in civilian life. The war itself gradually recedes in immediate consciousness, becoming environmental rather than exceptional. Artillery, once terrifying, becomes weather, something to be monitored and accommodated rather than feared anew each time. Death, once shocking, becomes statistical, not less tragic but less surprising when it occurs. This psychological adaptation enables survival but exacts costs that emerge fully only after the war. The hypervigilance necessary in trenches doesn't dissipate easily when danger passes. Reflexive responses to loud noises, crowded spaces, or confined environments persist for decades. Dreams replay combat experiences in endless variation. What later generations will call post-traumatic stress disorder remains unnamed but widely experienced among trench veterans. Some recover fully, others partially, some never at all. The invisible wounds often prove more persistent than physical injuries, shaping lives long after scars have healed. In the trenches themselves, men rarely discuss these long-term implications. Their focus necessarily remains on immediate survival and the welfare of comrades. The future exists as an abstract concept, a hypothetical state accessed through surviving first this day, then the next, then the rotation after that. This present-focused mindset characterizes frontline experience across all armies and theaters. It represents neither short-sightedness nor philosophical choice, but practical necessity. The scale of the war and its potential duration exceed individual comprehension or influence, making smaller timeframes the only manageable mental units. As your rotation in the front line continues, this narrowed perspective becomes increasingly natural. The world contracts to the few hundred yards of trench your section occupies, the men immediately around you, the tasks directly before you. Larger questions of strategy, politics, or war aims fade into irrelevance compared to maintaining wire defences or ensuring adequate ammunition supplies. Yet within this constrained existence, moments of unexpected beauty or connection still occur, a sunrise that briefly transforms no man's land from nightmare to painting, a letter shared among friends providing glimpses of the world beyond shell holes and barbed wire, small acts of kindness between men who have lost most normal outlets for compassion. These moments sustain the human spirit when conditions would otherwise crush it entirely. They provide necessary contrast to the prevailing grimness, reminding men that existence contains more than mud, fear, and death. They become treasured memories carried forward when the trenches themselves have returned to farmland or disappeared beneath new construction. The true history of the war resides in these personal experiences rather than official records or strategic assessments. The reality of trench warfare exists in individual perceptions, the specific weight of a wet uniform against tired shoulders, the particular quality of light filtering through morning mist over shell holes, the exact tone of a friend's voice offering encouragement during moments of despair. These sensory details, multiplied across millions of participants, constitute the war's most accurate record. They explain why veterans often find official histories inadequate, missing the lived texture of experience that defies generalization or abstraction.